Well, good morning, folks, and welcome back to this Mighty Mentors series. And as we have done in the first 2 weeks, we'll start off by having one of the people sitting here at the table with me share their experiences with a mentor. And this morning, Ed Shadle is going to share with us.
Okay, thanks. I don't have any hymn to share like Roger did. Nothing as detailed as that. But one individual that comes to mind that was a mentor of mine was through the workplace, and his name's John Watson. And his demeanor always struck me as different, stood out different from other people in how he communicated with folks, how he interacted with them, and he always left you feeling better than when he came, before he came and had an interaction with you. So I always looked up to that, and some of the things that I pick out now in retrospect and looking back is it marries up to what we read about fruits, kindness, okay, gentleness, right? Holding your tongue, self-control, right? And I think he embodied that to me. And that's really what struck me, maybe not at the time, but as I look back, I see that, and I try and emulate some of those qualities. So.
Well, thank you, Ed. I was making a couple notes here because what you were saying really dovetails right into the mentor that we're looking at today. We're moving on in the Old Testament. And today we look at the relationship between Elijah and Elijah. Years ago, when I was taking a lay speaking class that prepared lay people to preach in our churches, one of the classes that I took, the leader of the class assigned us a scripture to go spend the night looking at it and come back the next day on Saturday prepared to read that scripture to the class. And we didn't know it at the time, but he assigned all of us the same scripture. And it was one of the passages with Elijah and Elijah in them. And the point that he wanted to make is one that my wife makes to me over and over again, is that if you're going to read scripture in front of a congregation, you need to have read it ahead of time. You need to have practiced it. And I remember that message. I don't always practice it, but I remember that experience all the time. As I say, we're looking at this relationship between Elijah and Elijah, and we only look at the end of that relationship. The scripture that Pastor Don will be preaching on today is from 2 Kings, the 2nd chapter, the first 15 verses. And this deals with Elijah's devotion to Elijah and Elijah's departing from this world, not by dying, but by being caught up in a chariot of fire. One of the individuals that Scripture records that didn't die a physical death, but was taken up to be with God, just snatched up, if you will. And you'll recall in the New Testament that when Jesus takes the disciples to the mountaintop and God makes his presence known there, that Elijah is one of the prophets. Elijah and Moses are the two people that the disciples see standing there talking with Christ. So very prominent prophet. But he's a prophet that is different, at least in my mind, than the other prophets that we have there writing for us. Elijah didn't write anything that was recorded for us. His life and his ministry, if you will, are recorded in 1st and 2nd Kings. And I would encourage you, if you're really interested in following this up, to go back to 1 Kings, the 17th chapter, because that's where Elijah first appears. And then to read the accounts through to this scripture today at the beginning of 2 Kings. But where Elijah comes on the scene at the beginning of 1 Kings, this is what the Common English Bible says. Elijah from Tishbe, who was one of the settlers in Gilead, said to Ahab, "As surely as the Lord lives, Israel's God, the one I serve, there will be neither dew nor rain these years until I say so." As you read on the story, Elijah has a relationship with Ahab, who is the king at that time, and so much so that Ahab refers to him that every time you come and speak to me, you bring trouble. Well, it wasn't Elijah bringing trouble; it was Ahab's ruling that was bringing the trouble upon himself. But that begins the story of Elijah, and I just want to briefly recap that story. Some highlights. I've always felt that with the parts of the scripture that have been taken and made into movies, I've always wondered why nobody tackled Elijah and his story, because it is a rich, rich story with the special effects that they're able to incorporate into movies. There's a rich fodder here in this material to capitalize on that. And I just think it would make a great movie, but apparently nobody else thinks that in the case. But at the beginning of the story, after this exchange with Ahab and the prediction that there's not going to be any rain until Elijah says there'll be rain, and the implication there is that when God tells Elijah that there'll be rain, then Elijah will communicate that, and then there will be rain. But immediately after that, Elijah withdraws from humanity, so to speak, as a hermit, and the ravens take care of him. The ravens come and bring him food and look after him. And then the next incident, we find Elijah with a widow. During this time when it hasn't rained, crops have failed, and food has become very scarce. And this widow has only a small amount left to feed her and her son. And Elijah comes and he tells her, "I'm hungry. I need you to make me something to eat." And she says, "Well, I only have this little bit of grain left." And he said, "It'll be enough. Just trust me." And so she does. And then for the period of time until the rains come and the harvest comes again, every day there's enough grain and oil for not only Elijah but for the widow and her son to be taken care of during this time. And then we come to the story of the prophets of Baal and Jezebel. Jezebel is Ahab's wife. And when you read about her, you sort of get the stereotype image that has come to be associated with the name Jezebel. A very manipulative woman, very low character, self-centered. I guess that pretty well sums Jezebel up. But she uses Ahab, influences Ahab to get what she wants. But she's also sort of in a position of being over the prophets of Baal, the other gods that people are worshiping in this time. And God directs Elijah to do something about this. And so he challenges Jezebel and the prophets, meet me on the mountaintop and we'll see whose God is the best. And this is just a very graphic story that's recorded in the scripture there, that all these prophets gather up there. You have Elijah trash talking with them, challenging them, and saying insults to their God. You know, at one point he says, well, maybe he's sitting in the toilet. Maybe that's why he's not answering you. And he, after they've done their bit, and he says, well, I'll show you what a real God is. And to have they were going to have a sacrifice, and they couldn't even get their fire started, couldn't get their God to intervene. And he says, just so that you understand the power of God, he has them soak his wood with water, thoroughly soak it, and then he prays to God, and a lightning bolt comes down and devours, not only ignites the wood, but it devours the whole sacrifice. And then in the ensuing chaos, Elijah leads those that are following him, and all the prophets of Baal are killed on that mountaintop. Now, you think that that'd be a pretty high moment in your life, but what's the next thing that Elijah does? He runs off and hides. He literally runs as far away as he can, and he hides because he's afraid of Jezebel's wrath, that she's coming to get him. And he complains to God, all the people have turned away from you, God. I'm the only one left. And God tells him that he doesn't know what he's talking about. He doesn't know everything. He's not God, is what I interpret God to be saying to Elijah. But this is a passage where the storms come, the wind, the rain, and God does not speak in any of that. It's in the still small voice, the quietness, that Elijah hears God speaking to him. And then along the way, Elijah has become quite well known, and as he's traveling from one place to another, he passes by where Elijah is tilling his father's field. He's plowing the field with some oxen. And when Elijah comes by, he recognizes who he is, and he just leaves his father's field and says, I'm going with you. He just follows him after that. Elijah has always been somebody that I feel a kinship with, and that's because how he's described. You'll find, as you read through the story there, after Elijah is taken up, that the people are taunting Elijah, calling him Baldy. So I kind of feel a little bit of a kinship there with Elijah. But there was one thing that stood out to me, and that's that Elijah was more a prophet of action. He communicated to the people with his action the things that he was calling upon God to do, channeling God's power among the people, rather than the writing and the proclamations that you hear when you look at the other prophets that are recorded in Scripture. The time on the mountain is not the only time that Elijah calls the power of God down on the people. There's another incident where one of the military leaders and his men, that Elijah calls God's power down on them, and the lightning bolt strikes and kills all of the men there that are gathered up there. What do you think it was about Elijah that made Elijah just pack up? I mean, not really pack up, just throw down the reins of the oxen and said, I'm with you. And as Elijah's going to where he recognizes his death, or he's about to depart the earth, I should say, he keeps telling Elijah to stay here. I have to do this. And Elijah is not having any of that. He says, I'm going with you. Wherever you go, I'm going. And 3 times that happens, and he continues to go on. Well, what was it about Elijah, do you think, that caused this kind of attraction and devotion?
What made him known? He was a man of God, and it was clear. You could see it in his actions. I imagine you could probably see it in his person. I mean, just the way he was, you could tell that he was a man of God.
It's kind of like foretelling of what Jesus did when he called the 12. They dropped what they were doing, left the fishing boats, and followed Jesus without any question.
That's
So-
true.
And it's foretelling of had Jesus got his followers. That it was something about they may have heard about Jesus or not heard about him. But it was something about his personality and his persona that God had control, said, okay, y'all have had enough of fishing, go for something else that I want you to do. And follow them. Follow Jesus or follow Elijah.
It's kind of like your mentor you talked about. There was just something about him that made you feel good about yourself and made you feel like this was the person you want to follow. You just know.
Or emulate.
Well, that's why I jotted down a couple things as Ed was talking, because that's what came to me also. He stood out in a crowd. I think the word you used was his demeanor. And I think that there was just something about Elijah that when he came into a room or into a crowd of people, that drew your attention to him. And the fruits that you referred to, I just think that was probably a way of life for Elijah and the way he lived his life. The one thing that Scripture doesn't tell us is, how did Elijah get to this point of this relationship with God? He just comes on the scene with that description that I read to you. So we're left to ponder on our own, how did he get to that relationship with God? How did he get connected up? With Isaiah and Jeremiah, we have that connection that was made there, how God connected with them. With Jeremiah, it was as a child that God came to him. I think Scripture indicates he was like 6 years old. And God says, you're my person. You're going to be my man. And I just can't, as a child, how do you comprehend that kind of relationship? But somewhere along the line, there was that connection that God made with Elijah, that Elijah responded to. And I think that's the key there, that he responded to that, that made him to that point where he says, the one God, the one whom I serve, or the true God, the one who I serve, that he just knew that, and that was how he went about his life and did the things he did. But the other thing that stands out to me is he had this station in life that allowed him to be in the presence of the king. Ahab was the king of the people at that time. And so he had the authority of position to be able to go to Ahab at any time that he wanted to seek him out and to speak to him. And like I said, it got to the point where Ahab referred to him, you troubler of my soul, I think is the way he put it. Because whenever Ahab came, he knew he was in trouble. He had done something wrong again. Which begs the question, if he knew it, why didn't he do something about it?
Well, he was a crummy king. I mean, all the way through. He was a really bad king.
Yeah. Well, that's it for Elijah and Elisha. I can't remember whether I've mentioned this before for those of you that are seeing this online, but we truly want you to share this with anybody that you think might be interested in what's going on here with these background sessions of the scripture that our worship is built around on each Sunday. And so when you get that email that gives you the link, feel free to share that with anybody that you think might be interested in sharing this along with us. And we thank you for joining us and look forward to having you with us in worship later on this morning.